Greetings, everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. This is an interesting bit of news. So if you've been on the channel for a while, you all already know I'm a big fan of Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, and we've been waiting quite some time for a sequel to that amazing game. Well, supposedly we're going to get it next year, but Paradox has made it clear, regardless of how Bloodlines does, they are finished with the series. Courtesy of IGN, Bloodlines 3 will be done by someone else. Paradox is done with Vampire the Masquerade after the Bloodlines 2 debacle. The Chinese room will try and get Bloodlines 2 to the finish line in the first half of 2025. Now, what does Paradox mean when they say debacle? I'm not going to rehash the entire story here, but it's absolutely been a nightmare for everybody involved. The Chinese room was not the original developer for Bloodlines 2. I believe the name of the developer was Heartsuit Labs. They were working with the original composer for Bloodlines, and I believe a couple of the writers for the original game as well. All of those people got kicked off of the project by Paradox. To this day, I don't believe it's really clear why Paradox decided that they had to get rid of them, but they did absolutely do a clean sweep and put the Chinese room in charge of the project. And honestly, whether or not the Chinese room is even going to be capable of completing this game is still up for debate. It was supposed to release in 2024. They pushed it back to 2025. You can see here that they expected to be released in the first half of 2025. But honestly, everybody kind of is expecting for this game to just go ahead and get canceled. Now, digging more into the article, Paradox says they're ready to be done with Vampire the Masquerade and with RPGs in general. The deputy CEO, Matty, is telling PC Gamer that any potential Bloodlines 3 will be done by someone else. I don't know about you, me personally, I think that's fantastic news. I think Paradox has made it pretty obvious that they don't really know a lot about making good RPGs, and that it would be much better to let somebody else have control of that particular license. They are well known for amazing strategy games like Crusader Kings, but RPGs, their track record isn't nearly as good. Case in point, of course, I wasn't in the room when these decisions were made, and maybe they were made for very good reasons, but it's still incredible to me that the Chinese room got to have control of the Bloodlines license instead of Harebrained Schemes, which is a developer for Shadowrun and Shadowrun Returns, or Shadowrun Hong Kong as well. And instead of allowing them to be the ones doing a Bloodlines game, they were asked, or maybe they asked, to do the Lamplighters League. Obviously, that was a complete flop. It completely bombed. As soon as I saw the first trailer, I was like, this is probably going nowhere. Harebrained Schemes and Vampire the Masquerade seems like a match made in heaven. I really don't understand why Paradox didn't put them on this license and tell them, hey, pump out a Bloodlines game that people would actually be proud of. I feel like they would have been really capable of that, but unfortunately, we'll probably never know, and we'll just have to see how Bloodlines 2 turns out. Now, Mattias opened up about Bloodlines 2 during the course of a frank interview that he's doing as part of a media tour, because Paradox kind of wants to reset its reputation after some problematic releases, which I've already talked about a little bit, and reports of a toxic work culture. So this is actually from about 2, maybe 3 years ago, where Paradox had hired on someone who I believe was the guy's last employer was sued for harassment. And then it came out that Paradox kind of had a culture of silence where women were actually directly told, hey, you're a token hire, you have really no purpose here, and there's no reason for you to speak. And so again, that's a couple of years ago. It's not clear at all to me that Paradox still has that culture problem. And according to this article, it seems like they're kind of trying to reset that image. So hopefully all that stuff got addressed. All those leaders who were involved got swept out the door. As I recall, the culture issues weren't like Ubisoft bad, where it was just all the way out of control, but it was definitely some things that needed to be addressed so that women could feel comfortable working at the company. So next up, Mattias talks more about what he wants to do with the license. It is not our strategic direction to make this kind of game, speaking about Bloodlines. So if Bloodlines 2, God willing, is successful, Bloodlines 3 will be done by someone else on the license from us. I would say it's sort of strategic way this would work. So it's still an outlier from what we're supposed to do. We don't know that stuff, so we should probably let other people do it. Fantastic. Owlcat. Owlcat, sit down with Paradox, split some bread between the two of y'all, and make this happen. I think Owlcat would do wonders with this license. Obviously, Larian Studios would as well, but I think Larian, they strike me as they don't want to really cooperate with anyone anymore. They're kind of above it all. So they're like, we're just going to do our own thing. But Owlcat has just become a publisher. Obviously, they're all about cooperation. Frankly, Owlcat might sit down with Paradox and say, hey, we're serving as the publisher for this new developer. We want them to make a Bloodlines game. Let's go ahead and see what we can make happen. But I think the dark, gritty tone of Vampire the Masquerade is perfect for the type of stories Owlcat loves to tell. There's probably a couple of other developers who would be able to make a great Bloodlines game, but it's also a matter of, do you have the capability to do a profit split with Paradox in a way where you could be confident you would still make money? And I think Owlcat is definitely a developer that's large enough and knows that they would be able to make a game of this type that's successful enough where it would make sense. Absolutely would love to see that. Let me know down in the comments if there are some other developers that maybe I haven't mentioned who you feel like would be really, really good options to make the next Bloodlines game. So next, Mattias talks about this a little bit more and said he considers Bloodlines a dead end for the company regardless of how well it does. So it seems like the Chinese room most likely is not going to be allowed to do a sequel to the game. Of course, this is made more awkward by the fact that Paradox Interactive owns Vampire the Masquerade creator White Wolf Publishing. So for those who aren't aware, there's, of course, the video game version, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, but there's also the tabletop Vampire the Masquerade that is part of the World of Darkness universe, which is all under White Wolf Publishing. If I remember correctly, Paradox bought this for like $1.5 million US dollars. So if I remember correctly, it wasn't like crazy expensive. So I wouldn't be surprised if Paradox actually just wants to offload the whole thing and not even bother with White Wolf anymore. But at the same time, it's probably very easy for this venture to make its money back, even without the RPG aspect of it, just from the tabletop stuff that they're doing. That's probably make the investment worth it. So whoever purchased it will probably have to pay more than that 1.5 that Paradox spent. But still, and some tells me Paradox is just done with the whole thing, especially since they're not doing anything else with that White Wolf license, right? Like Vampire the Masquerade is not the only part of it. There are other sections that they could do RPGs or spin-off games of, and they've tried a couple of things, but all of it has been crap. All of it has been absolutely terrible. And frankly, since they specialize in strategy games, you would think that they would try to do a strategy game, you know, that's similar to Crusader Kings, that's based in the White Wolf landscape, but they haven't even tried to do that. It doesn't seem like they're really all that interested in making games with this White Wolf license. I guess they were under the impression or under the hope that the original plans to do Bloodlines 2 would pan out a lot faster and be a lot more profitable, and obviously that hasn't really panned out. There was one thing he said, though, that irritated the crap out of me, and I think just really highlights Paradox is not the right group to be in charge of this license. Mattias says, I think it's fairly clear, at least to me, and I think to you, even in the best of cases, Bloodlines does not have a super long shelf life. That's not the way these games behave. You have an influx of players, there's a bit of word of mouth, and they have a high peak, and then they trail off. And it's not the type of gameplay that develops over time that much. So I think that's part of why these types of games are not really that attractive to us. That's nonsense. And the fact that you're working on a sequel a whole decade after the original game dropped should make it clear to you that that's nonsense. If you make a stellar game in this genre, it absolutely has a long shelf life. There are people who still buy Bloodlines, who still play Bloodlines. In fact, I'm following a guy on Twitter who is pretty much dedicating all of his time every day to completely modding and updating Bloodlines for current gen. Like, no, that's not true at all. That's not true at all. Just because you guys haven't been able to pull it off doesn't mean these types of games in general have a short shelf life. That's not true at all. If you make a quality RPG, actually it has a very long shelf life. Obviously, watching everything that's happening with Baldur's Gate 3 should easily clue you in on that. Anyway, that's the video. I felt like a lot of you would find that fascinating. Honestly, I'm hopeful about Bloodlines. I'm not all that hopeful about Bloodlines 2. I think considering the delays and the fact that they're not showing us any more gameplay really makes me hesitant about the experience that the Chinese room is crafting. But once we're past Bloodlines 2, I think the world is going to be wide open for another developer to step in and say, hey, I know what to do with this. I know what to do with Vampire the Masquerade. Let me have a crack at it. I'll break you all off some bread, and then we'll be able to do this game proper. That would be amazing to see. One thing I didn't go over in the article is Paradox did say, or rather Mattias did say, if Chinese room hadn't been able to join, they were just going to flat out cancel the game. They felt like the situation was pretty much unsalvageable, you know? So I'm definitely going to keep all this in mind in the review. I don't feel like it's fair to try to give the Chinese room like a crazy hard time about what they're able to produce, because it's just completely obvious what a crap show this entire situation is, you know? So it's kind of a situation where if they hadn't stepped in, we probably wouldn't be getting a Bloodlines game, period. I'd rather get some aspect of the game and then be able to look forward to Bloodlines 3 than have this canceled and pretty much back to square one. So I think regardless of how good or not good Bloodlines 2 is, the future is bright. There's just gotta be a developer out there who sees this news and is like, you know what? I could do something with this. Let me have it. And I can't wait to find out who that is, and I'm really hoping that they know how to do an RPG properly, and it'll be something that all of us enjoy. Let me know you all's thoughts down below. Do you feel like I'm a little bit too hopeful about this, or do you agree that, man, Bloodlines 3 is where it's at, and we might have something to look forward to, regardless of how Bloodlines 2 turns out? I'm looking forward to hearing you all's feedback, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.